Our speaker today believes in the power within him and in others. He grew up in a family of 9 children. He was the youngest. He really knows what a family is and how important it is to love one another. He is an author. His book, Silent Cry, is in our library, and he speaks to children everywhere, trying to help them stop the violence. Mr. EJ Bassette.
Good morning. Let's give our youth a round of applause again. As I see them, I see all the joy on their faces and all the wonderful children that we have. But I can't help from taking a moment to think about all the young people that didn't make it this far. One young man in particular comes to mind, and that was Eric Morse. Who remembers the little boy that was thrown from the 14th floor in Ida B. Wells projects? He comes to mind because of the courage and the values that Eric stood for. See, Eric was a little boy, only 5 years old, and he didn't want to steal any candy. And because he didn't want to steal any candy or join a gang, the young men decided to throw Eric out of the 14th floor window. Imagine yourself hanging 14 floors high, and someone decides to take your fingertips and to push you out. His younger brother was 8 years old. He wrestled with these young men, trying to save Eric's life. They finally overpowered him, and Eric fell 14 floors to his death. As I thought about that, I was compelled to go to his funeral, and at his funeral, as I walked toward his coffin, I saw a teddy bear in his arms. And I realized that he was so small. He had not lived his dreams. When I got home, I talked to my own 7-year-old son, and he wanted to know why I didn't save Eric's life. My son knows that I would do anything to save his life. He knows that I would do anything to spare him, so he wanted to know what I had done to save Eric's life. I let my son know that I'm doing all that I can so that another Eric Morse will never happen again. How many of us were children before? Please raise your hand. That's almost all of us. I know some of you were grown as adults. I grew up in Ida B. Wells projects, and my family lived there in 1945. And as my mother and father would tell me about the projects, they would tell me that there was once grass there. There was once a beautiful community. They said it was the model of black community, middle class living. But by the time I was a kid, things started to change. One day I was standing on the porch with my best friend from the age of 4. We were 8 years old at the time. His name was Ray. And we were standing there, and as a man walked through the area, Ray asked me, did I see him? I said, yes, I see him. He said, that's the same man that murdered my cousin. I looked at the man, I said, there's no way this man could have murdered your cousin and still be walking around. I found out that Ray was telling the truth. So when I would see this man, what do you think I did? All right, I ran. But listen, Ray would stand there and speak to him. One day I even seen my best friend shake the man's hand, because that meant power to kill someone and to still be walking around. By the time we were in 7th grade, Ray joined a gang, and part of his initiation was to beat up his best friend. And he walked up to me with his new friends one day and he hit me smack between the eyes. And those little Tweety birds that you see, they're for real. But I didn't swing back at Ray because, one, I didn't want to get beat up by the other 3 guys I was with him. But I told his mother and his older brother, because Ray was my best friend. And see, Ray had a dream when we were young. He said he wanted to write a book. And we were going to write a book from ghetto to glory. And we were going to make it out of the projects one day. And we would be superstars. I would be a football player and Ray would be a baseball player. He said one day we're going to come back in these big old long limousines. And we're going to be superstars and we're going to give away money to the children. I believed Ray's dream so much that I started taking mental notes because he was my best friend and he talked about it so much. By the time I was in 8th grade, all I wanted to do was go to a high school called Lindblom. And I finally passed the test. It was one of the top high schools in Chicago. But when I went to my assistant principal and I told her that I had passed the test, she said, EJ, don't go to Lindblom. She said, you'll never make it. She said, you go to Wendell Phillips. That's your neighborhood. Those are your kind of people. See, sometimes it's the adults that take the stars out of the kids' eyes. Sometimes it's us that say the wrong thing to our kids. And we crushed them. And I looked at her and I said, no, I'm going to Lindblom. And I'm going to play football. I'm going to make it one day. But that summer, before I went on, we were sitting on the banister and 3 of us, along with Ray. And they said, all we're going to do is take one radio. It'll be easy. We live right off the lakefront. And they walked away and Ray looked at me and I looked at him. And I said, Ray, that's not part of the plan. I said, I want to go to high school. I want to be something. And they walked away and they came back with this boy's radio and they told me how they took it from him. I looked at Ray. And it was just fun. But I think about the young men that was with Ray that day. See, one murdered a young lady while she was 9 months pregnant. He's in jail for life. The second young man that was with Ray that day was accused of killing a baby in a drive-by shooting. He won't see parole until the year 2005. The third young man that was with Ray that day was beat so bad by the gangs he has permanent brain damage. I think about those young men, and I think about that simple choice, because problems start small. They start easy. They always start with the little things, and then they add up. The young men that killed Eric Morris had a long arrest record already. They said if they had a second chance, that they would do it again. I finally went on to Lindblom. And at Lindblom, I would catch that 35th Street bus to the L, catch the L to 63rd, get off at Halsted or Ashland, and go over to Walcott. And when I would get there, Lindblom was in the Inglewood area, the second worst area in Chicago. So I would get there and somebody would rob me. One day, I had finally got my football equipment. And the coach said, whatever you do, don't let anyone take that equipment. And I had my equipment on one hand and my books on the other. And 10 young men walked up to me. And I'm straight out the projects. I said, what you want? They said, this is what we want. Bam, bam, bam. I said, oh, take it. Take it, take it. Oh. Now, you know I didn't do that. I took about 10 of them, kicked them around. But I lived to tell about it. But I was robbed at gunpoint or knife point at least 8 times at Lindblom. And all I wanted to do was live long enough to make it out. My sophomore year, my mother had had 9 kids. I was the youngest and had a hard head. People said that Ray was going to worry his mother to death, or we were going to kill our parents by worrying them. My mother decided after 33 years of marriage that she had had enough, and she said that she had to go. One day, I came home, and my mother had left. Ray would see her at the store down in Lake Meadows. He would say, your mother's down at the store, and we would run down to see her. And when I would get up to her, she would say, I'm not your mother anymore. And I would walk away. I found out where she lived, and I would go to the stairs. And when I would get there, I would knock on the door. And when she would answer, I would just say, I love you. and she would close the door, say she couldn't speak. Ray would sit down. He'd sit down at the bottom of the stairs. He would say, how do you deal with that? I said, before my mother left, she taught me one thing, that in God, all things are possible. I said, I believe in the message and not the messenger. See, sometimes your own mother, your own father, your own sister, your own brother may turn against you. But in God, all things are possible. Don't believe in man. You believe in God, and all your wishes and dreams will come true. I went on. Now, I'm going to get a little heavy on you, but you can deal with it. Because it's time for us to deal with our problems with our young people. We were young once, but we forget about it when we walk by them and see them and don't want to talk to them or deal with them. When I wanted to go to college, and I went on to college, and Ray was at the same campus I was at. We took all the baggage from Chicago down on that campus. Ray flunked out, and he was back home, and his mother died in front of him one day. He called me for the funeral, and at the funeral, Ray told me that all the years that his mother did things for him, he had never told her that he loved her. He said, Mom, I would drive by my mother in my car, and I would see her with her groceries, and I wouldn't pick her up and take her home. He said, all the years that I saw her, I never told her that I loved her. He said, there's nothing that I want to live for now. He wrote me a letter down in school, and it said, EJ, I hope that you play professional ball, and I want you to go. He said, it reminds me of Ghetto to Glory, which was the book that we were going to write. He said, I know you're coming home soon, and I'll be glad to see you, because I think life is slipping away. He said, I'm having so many problems, and I know you're the only one that can understand. He said, it's a hard year without having a mother. We were only 20 years old at that time, and I started going on a mission to save my best friend's life. 2 weeks after his mother died, Ray was shot for selling drugs. And I went on and started changing my life in order to save my best friend's life. I went on and graduated from college, and I met my college sweetheart. Where's she at? Raise your hand. There she is. My wife and my 3 beautiful kids right there. And I stand up. Oh, I believe in family because I have one, a big one. And one day when I got out of school, my older brother, I was working with him. And we said we were going to get rich, but the only thing, he was paying me $50 a week. Now, my father said, if you don't get a real job, you're going to have to get out. My wife, or my girlfriend at the time, just got a new job making $15,000. And I said, honey, you got to marry me. Because if you don't marry me, he's going to throw me out. She said, I can't marry you. You're a broke brother. So I got smart. One day, I went to the store where it was full of people. And I said, if I get romantic and sentimental with all these people around, she can't turn me down. So I got on one knee and I said, will you marry me? She said, no. You ain't making enough money. So I got on my knee and I said, marry me. And the crowd said, marry him. She said, no. I said, marry me. The crowd said, marry him. They said, no. So finally I grabbed her hand and I said, if you don't marry me, I'm going to squeeze it so hard, you're going to holler something and they're going to say, she said yes, she said yes. But we took that $15,000 that she made and that $50 a week and we started our family. She never criticized me for the little money that I bought in that house. She always treated me like a man. That next year I went to corporate America and became salesman of the year for one of the biggest companies in the world. I made over $50,000 and she was just making that little piddly 15. But at the same time, I started traveling all over the world and all over the country. I took her to Europe. I took her to Venice, Italy. I took her to the Bahamas. I took her to Hawaii. Yes, I did. I did, didn't I, baby? Yes, I did. I took that woman all over the world. And when you got a beautiful woman on your arms, oh, it makes a difference, man. It makes a difference. At the same time, Ray was back in the projects getting in trouble. One day my wife called and said Ray had been shot again. This time it was in the head. As I got to the hospital, I saw them wheeling his body in, and his body was shaking out of control. I went up to the room where they put him. They wouldn't clean him off because there were so many young men that had been shot that night. I saw my best friend as I talked to the doctor. They said they couldn't operate because the bullet had ripped through his head and tore up his brain. They said if he lived, he would be a vegetable. This is very serious. I watched him go from 170 pounds down to 90 pounds. And as we buried Ray, I knew that it was Ray that had the dream. I knew it was Ray that wanted to write the book. But Ray's not here. But he left a son. And I put him on the cover of the book. I put him on the cover right here next to my son. Because his son wants to know what his father was like. He wants to know who his father was. We have to let our kids dream. Even though all the things I went through, I refuse to let my kids not stand for excellence. See, my daughter, she's 10 years old, and she wants to be a scientist. But she wants to be a scientist that's going to help animals live, and she's going to save animals all over the world. My 70-year-old son, he wants to be an engineer, but he's going to make these things called pajamas. He says when you put them on at night. Now check it out. He said when a kid puts these pajamas on at night, they can put them on, and when a fire comes into the house, they can walk out and not be burned. And my 4-year-old, she broke the news to me. She said, I'm going to be Barney the dinosaur, whether you like it or not. So I started adding up the money. I said, Barney's worth about $100 million, okay? I want you to know that I wanted to dedicate my life to stopping the violence. So I went on to write the book. It took me 3 years to believe that I can write it and 3 years to write it. They said, you'll never get the book published. So I started my own publishing company. My wife allowed me to put our life savings into this project. Now she calls me a broke brother again. They said, you can't sell the book. I said, I was #1 in corporate America. I'll sell the book door to door if I have to. They said, you can't speak. They said, you can't speak. You're not articulate. I said, I'll go to Les Brown and have him train me. They said, you can't get on TV. But Oprah has a copy of my book. Geraldo, Jesse, Sally, Raphael. So don't wait to get the book. Get it today from me, because I'm a broke brother. But as I leave you, I want you to understand that there's someone in this room that I believe has the cure for AIDS. There's someone, a little child in this room, who has the cure for cancer. There's someone in the room that can stop the crime. There's someone in the room that can build the tallest building in the world. There's a little kid in this room that's going to be like Dr. Martin Luther King. There's a little kid in the room that's going to be the next Malcolm X. There's a kid in the room that's going to be the next Sojourner Truth. There's a kid in the room that's going to be the next Harriet Tubman. There's a kid in the room that's going to be the next Reverend Johnny Coleman. All you have to do is believe in God, and all things are possible. All things are possible. All things are possible. Thank you, and I love you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. EJ Bassette.
$1 a week. Now my father said if you don't get a real job, you're going to have to get out.